Skyrim released on the 11th of the 11th, 2011. One of the most satisfying parts of this game's release, but definitely not the only thing. Many like me might think about the world itself, the adventures you go on, and the stories that are being told. But others might be thinking purely about the modding community and how the mods are some of the best things to come out of this game. Some view this game as absolute trash and others believe it to be close to perfection. This game, along with a few others, I've learned to be surprisingly controversial with those who believe them to be a great game. But even after all of that, it became one of the best-selling games of all time, and at the time of its release was the best-selling open-world game to ever exist. However, I love this game for a variety of reasons, but it ends up being boiled down to one particular thing. And that one specific thing is that this game is certainly my comfort game. I always feel at home when I'm playing this game, which is why I decided to make this video. So welcome to my love letter to Skyrim. I'll be breaking this video down into 3 separate categories: my childhood love for the game, it being my comfort game, and then lastly, the modding community. I think all 3 of these collectively add up to different points that people might be able to resonate with. But not only that, I think allows me to discuss all 3 things in this video as best as I can. This video, like I mentioned a moment ago, is more like a love letter, so don't expect me to be hating this game and bashing it tons. I will be talking about it from the heart of how much I actually genuinely love this game and how it affected me growing up. However, as well as that, it doesn't necessarily mean that I will just completely shadow over every single negative aspect. I will briefly mention some of them whilst going through it. However, I will be discussing more in depth later on. But this video is specifically targeting those things. The reason why I love this game so much, why I find it to be a comfort game for me and how it makes me feel, and lastly, how the modding community, in my opinion, is given a little bit too much credit for keeping the game alive. But just before I get into the first section, talking about my childhood love for this game, I just wanted to say that I've launched a Patreon, so if you do want to support this channel, make sure to go click that link down below and you can support the channel there. You'll be able to get access to exclusive content every now and again. I'm not going to be posting tons and tons of exclusive content, however, it will be every now and again. You'll get early access to all videos, such as the video essays over on this channel, and then also you'll have a bit more of a say in terms of the actual content coming out. So if I have, let's say, 5 video ideas, I'll put all of them into there and you guys can choose out of those 5 which ones you're more interested in seeing first and then last. And lastly, I'll also be making a Discord that is going to be dedicated to you guys who are Patreons of the channel, and obviously, like every single Patreon, you'll always have a form of shout out at the end of every single video. But anyway, let's jump into why I love this game so much, and it being my childhood favourite game to play. I've always been a massive fan of the fantasy genre, but more in particular, I've always loved the medieval time of history and the stories that surround it. Ever since I was a kid, I would always look at the places like the town that I grew up in and think about how they would have looked and functioned back in this medieval historic time. I would always look at places like inns on a long road between towns and think about how these places would have been viewed back in the day. Looking more specifically on how long it would have taken to travel between different towns and so on to get to these pubs in the middle and the inns to stay in, it always just fascinated me. So all around there has always been a part of me that has always loved this sort of thing. Some of the first parts of me loving the fantasy genre came in places like the Beast Quest franchise. However, I'm not going to turn around and say that I read tons of this stuff because I didn't. I literally read the first book only, and then I bought the other ones, and because I hated reading, I rarely read them. But yeah, I literally read the first book and started to really enjoy the fantasy genre. And I just pretty much come up with everything in my head of what I wanted to talk about. But also playing games like Dragon Quest IX when I was a little bit older led to me playing games like Assassin's Creed and eventually Skyrim. I was 9 when Skyrim came out, and my mum ended up buying it for me on the PS3. However, I wasn't able to play it that often, as my sister and older brother would normally end up taking over and choosing what to play. However, all around, even the moments that I got to play the game, it just kept crashing at the moment you get to the chopping block. But this led to me completely abandoning the game for a little bit. But around about 6 months or 12 months or so after this, I ended up getting an Xbox 360 for my birthday. This was the first proper console I'd ever had that was genuinely mine and wasn't being used all the time by other people, and Skyrim was one of the first games that I got, along with things like Black Ops 2 and eventually Halo 4 when that released. For the first month or so, I'd say is the only time that I've genuinely actually roleplayed within Skyrim, which is something that I find a massive flaw in the way that I play many different games, mainly obviously the RPG genre. When I was younger, I remember always being scared of doing so many different things within the game, so instead I'd put on my hunting gear gear and go hunt deer. I'd be cutting loads of wood as a normal townsman, in the outfit and all, to save up enough money to eventually buy a house. And even things like smithing I had at level 60 before I even went and did Bleak Falls Barrow, as my character had just been living within Whiterun as, I guess, just a member of society. It wasn't until I had enough money to try and buy a house I realised very quickly that sadly I couldn't, and I needed to do Bleak Falls Barrow, which sparked me to eventually start playing this game properly. I'm not sure about anyone else, but when I was younger, I was genuinely scared and worried when going around some games, and Skyrim for me was one of the main ones. I was scared originally of leaving Whiterun and going around these different areas and going into the unknown, however I did eventually. This didn't stop me though from being terrified, going into caves. I remember specifically my first time I stumbled into Blackreach, and just being terrified the entire time, seeing things like the Falmor, and then eventually obviously the Centurions coming after me, after I do a slightly incorrect movement. I even remember being so scared of being randomly approached by highwaymen that I would just run away, and my heart rate would genuinely heighten. This was very odd, and I don't know if other people deal with this, but I think maybe it's just something that you have when you're a kid, but yeah. Eventually this slowly faded away, but most of the time when I was a kid, me and my friend Jake would sit in Xbox party chats for so long, from the moment we would wake up on the weekends, for example, all the way to the end of the day, and the same when it came to school. The moment we would come back from school, we'd be on the game until the evening. When friends would ask us to go play another game, we'd end up saying no, because we were just sat there playing Skyrim. I was one, addicted, but I also loved this game so much. It was what I ended up playing for hours on end, and I wish I could go back and find my 360 hours to genuinely show you how many, but sadly, for some reason, you can't actually find that information. It's a very sad thing. However, I do think one of the most memorable moments for me was experiencing the mission of the Fallen the first time. It felt so epic in magnitude that the idea that I was going to be able to tame a dragon and do as I see fit and fly as far away as I wanted to was completely mind-boggling for the imagination factory to run wild. But I'm jumping ahead slightly. After doing Bleak Falls Barrow, I really started to fall in love with this game. I started to learn way more things about it. I started to explore beyond the walls of Whiterun. Eventually I stumbled across Solitude. I remember seeing it for the first time and coming across it from the north and just finding it to be an amazing looking place. I remember learning about Dawnbreaker and being so hyped to eventually get it. Seeing possibly one of the coolest weapons in the game become mine was amazing. But remember, after hearing the sound of
a new hand touches the beacon.
During my younger days, I remember playing this game and being constantly amazed by the size of the world and how alive it felt. Like I said, I'm a big fan of most things medieval, and it's always been able to set off my imagination. So games like Skyrim were the perfect sandbox that encapsulated this for me. I'll always remember being at the throat of the world for the first time and looking out over Skyrim to see how massive this game truly was. Obviously now this game isn't the biggest game by miles, but I think Bethesda did a really good job of packing this game with a lot of things that make the world feel bigger than it actually was. Even the small things though that can make this game come alive are things like the Dark Brotherhood's first ever attempt to kill you, making it so interesting for you to understand who is doing this and why it would be happening, eventually leading to you just having that moment or stumbling across a door randomly in a swamp that eventually leads to you assassinating the Emperor of the entirety of Tamriel. It is what makes you feel a part of this world, and it makes you feel alive as if you understand everything from the guilds attacking you to the quests that you're having to do to save the world from Alduin. Now this is where I want to spend some time and talk about the first few times exploring this world, and when I say this I mean I've played this game probably 15 to 20 times from start to finish, with a good amount of resets in between that throughout my lifespan of playing this game. And the first 5 playthroughs, and even into the years of the special edition coming out, I find new things all the time and just paying more attention to what's going on each time. It's like when you're driving on a road and more times that you're on it over and over again, you pick up on smaller details every single time that just pick up your curiosity. The opening of this game is something that I've mentioned within my open worlds video essay, but I think the opening of this game is in fact the perfect template towards making people amazed by the world. I think where it all starts off for Skyrim's open world is with its constraint in its intro. All great open worlds do this thing where you're constrained in a smaller area that allows you into the vast world afterwards. I won't go too much into depth of this specific point, purely because I've already spoken about it in my open worlds video essay, but I remember just going around the world the first time and truly enjoying how amazingly big this game was in comparison to feeling as enclosed as you were going through those hills of Helgen. Skyrim gives you this level of constraints that when you start off and you get to explore, you truly are amazed by what you see. You can go off and just follow the questline that you're being given for the story, or you can go and walk off your own path and head off to Markarth and learn more about what's going on over on the Imperial side of the map. The way this open world is set up though is to give the player genuine sovereignty, to a degree, obviously within its own constraints. However, it is at the price of giving you actual accountability. Some games struggle to find this balance, and what I mean is that a lot of open world games will give you the sovereignty to explore, but at the cost of level capping you in different areas of the map. Games like Assassin's Creed or The Witcher 3 or Elden Ring do this as well, giving you a reason to level up, but on your way you'll still be able to explore them at your own cost. However, on the other side of this coin you have full world exploration, which normally doesn't come to fruition in many games out there, but the main games that I can really think of off the top of my head that are good examples of this are things like Spider-Man and GTA 5. This then allows you to freely explore the map, but it doesn't really give you much reason to care about leveling up or really exploring many new areas outside of really just general curiosity to check out the map. But with Skyrim, almost everything is available to you, like I mentioned earlier with something like a GTA game, but the areas that you'll be exploring will always have added levels of difficulty to never feel like you're truly destroying everything in your path until you reach probably level 25 to 30, depending on how hard you've even been pushing the different upgrades. Which does make a massive difference when exploring a world like Skyrim, as you have general curiosity because of the quests and the changing styles of area that you're traversing, but you also have the added layers of difficulty related to some of these quests. For example, if you go to the Reach in the early game, you'll realise that fighting Hangravens and Forsworn is kind of difficult. So they are definitely meant to be a little bit harder to deal with and something that you're doing a little bit later on, or at least in the mid game, and designed for that first little experience after you've done a lot of stuff within Whiterun and meeting the Greybeards. As obviously there is probably a level of design that the developers wanted you to follow, so getting your first shout and so on. However, all in all, you can still go the opposite direction of the map and explore. So because of all of this though, it meant that we were wanting to explore, but it didn't make us feel as if we were dictated to by the developers on the only way to go, and this area had to be the way that you were going. As everything was level scaled to a degree that meant that there was some challenge, but it wasn't so challenging you wanted to quit, or so easy that you found it boring. But the last time I fully played this game was back in 2021, which was the first game I played for a very long time properly, and it was actually the reason that I ended up making this channel and putting out content consistently. So not only does this game have a massive connection to me because it was the game outside of like the AC franchise that I would go out and play consistently throughout the last decade of my life, but it was also the game that started making me want to make content properly like this. And in my last playthrough, I realised that I loved this game for its ability to make me feel as if I'm actually a part of the world that it's letting me explore. When I went through the docks of Windhelm, I believed the feeling of the cold side lake, the mistreatments of the Argonians and Dark Elves. When I walked through Riften, I felt the city was warm and a community-driven area, but it had that darker undertone, everything you could just sense. When going to Falkreath, it felt like I was going to an old lumber town that felt like it was genuinely there in its natural place. Some of these places people would class as obviously the same and copy-paste, however, due to the change in tone, the lighting and some structural changes, it ends up making every single place feel genuinely unique. However, I'll just pretend as if Dawnstar and Morthal don't exist because they do feel very copy-paste. They are very similar in terms of overall look and design and so on. However, I actually don't mind them. I think that there is differences between both of them when it comes to learning and exploring both of those cities that end up giving you genuine intrigue. Morthal, I will probably say though, is the most boring out of all of them. But one thing that I really enjoyed in this playthrough is that I played it as I saw fit. However, this does link to an issue that I do have with many RPG games, especially whilst I grew up, was that I struggled to ever roleplay as a character, and it always made me feel as if I was playing the game wrong. As I've never been able to get massively into the whole idea of my character's backstory is this, and this is how the things were beforehand, and this is how they lived like this. I've always been someone who just kind of plays how I see fit. I'm always, the person who ends up being a stealth archer, or I use two-handed most of the time, which all I'll say is that the two-handed build is, in my opinion, the most fun playstyle of Skyrim. However, I have obviously played many different playstyles from the Archer, one-handed, two-handed, mages, restoration mages, thief, two-bladed dagger, all these sorts of things, assassin builds, like everything across the board I've played already. And all around, I would 100% recommend playing the two-handed build if you haven't already. But if you want to make it even more fun, play it as a orc. Use a two-handed orc build with the ebony blade. The mixture of the stat boosts that you get as an orc, the ebony blade's healing abilities, everything, it's absurd and you become an absolute god. However, even though I said earlier that the thing that I always do every single playthrough for the most part is play however I like, the most memorable times that I can honestly say I've ever had with this game was when I was younger and I was role-playing in my mind. I can remember with such clarity going back to the idea of putting on my hunting gear to go hunt some deer and elk, or putting the smithing gear on to make my stats even higher within that department and make myself have the best armor I could. Every time I've played this game, outside of the PS3 copy, the 360, One, Series X, Switch or PC, I've never had any genuine glitches or bugs that have ever bugged me enough to make me not want to come back and play this game. But that is something that I do want to get back into. I want to have that level of imagination again. I would love to just sit down and play a game and actually be a character instead of just playing however I want to. However you want to is fun, I'd say, for most playthroughs. However, I think with a game like Skyrim and the choices that you have, yes, some will say are limited, however I would say are tactically constrained, I do think are better and more fun to play when you are role-playing and you're enjoying the idea of this character. However, for me, I just struggle keeping myself within that mentality. Now, I will discuss a flaw of this game, which is the bugs, and I will admit it. I'm not going to say that the bugs are not there, however, I don't think they are as bad as everyone makes them out to be. For me, every single time I've played this game outside of the PS3 copy, so everything from the 360, the One, the Series X, the Switch, or the PC, I've never had any glitches or bugs that have ever made me so irritated or annoyed or never wanting to play the game again, so this sort of thing is always a criticism I can't ever really take to heart with this game. But this criticism is obviously true. The game does have its bugs, however, I don't think it's as bad as some people like to try and make it out to be. I do think a lot of people experience like one bad bug, and then they basically turn around and throw the game out as if it's like awful, when in reality, it's really not that bad. However, one criticism that I do think is a genuinely valid criticism is the idea of the game's map feeling fairly similar going through it, and a lot of the quests just being fetch quests to copy and pasted bandit camps. Now, this is something that I do understand, however, again, it's not really something that ever has made me that irritated. For the most part, I've never found it, annoying that the bandits all look the same, because in my mind, I'm just like, cool, they're bandits, let's go kill them. I don't really care. And honestly, the fetch quest side of things, again, it's kind of like the typical story that you get within pretty much every game out there. You're either going there to kill someone or you're going there to take something from someone whilst you've then murdered them. It's very hard for a lot of games to do anything really that intriguing with it, so it's always something that I find no matter what game it is under the sun that I can't turn around and say is awful. For example, people already know who watch this channel. I'm not a massive fan of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but I'm not going to turn around and complain about the fact that loads of the quests in the game are just you go here, you go kill someone, or you go here, you collect something, because fundamentally, realistically, what else do you want out of a game like it? Obviously, you could do stuff like, investigations like you got within Assassin's Creed Unity, but within a game like Skyrim, I don't really know exactly what you would want outside of maybe like a political side of things. Maybe you want like some form of like, you could do a political storyline of all these different things, but overall, never been something that truly affects me. I think the easiest way of solving this, if you're someone who dislikes it, is obviously mods that make the bandits more like diverse and so on, and make them more interesting. There's that as well, so that could be a good option for you to play the game. But all in all, this doesn't really matter for me. Skyrim has always been a game that I never really cared about the way the encampments were, or the way they were made, or the fact that a lot of the things that you're doing are just wandering around the world and simply doing nothing. All of this, though, is blinded by two things. One is nostalgia, I'm willing to admit that, and the other is the factor that this game is my comfort game. Many people have ways of dealing with things, and when I was growing up, I would normally either sit and listen to music as loud as I could and really irritate my sister, or I would go play games. For other people, you might find ways of dealing with things and just find a different game. You know, everyone has that outlet. You may have an album or an artist that you want to listen to, or you might have a comfort show. For me, I'll end up listening to things like Eminem if I'm getting really irritated or angry, just because angry Eminem just hits different for me. Or going and watching something like Big Bang Theory or Brooklyn Nine-Nine makes me feel as if, in a way, I'm kind of comforted by those characters. It's a very odd feeling, but I think a lot of people will resonate with this, which is why I'm bringing it up. For me, I end up jumping into games like Skyrim or playing things like Assassin's Creed 2 because those games remind me of when I was younger and being able to find comfort within them. But Skyrim is the game that is the one that I've been playing over all of these years consistently as that comfort outlet. I mentioned as well earlier that this game was the one that made me want to start this channel and made me want to talk about games in this manner. At that time in my life, I was feeling somewhat lost. I had been working full time and then chosen to go down a little bit of that self-employed route, and was doing my own thing as best as I could. However, it didn't mean everything was going swimmingly. So I ended up doing everything I could, trying to get more into my own self-development, like I said, doing self-employment, and eventually I started playing my own games again, as I had taken a bit of a hiatus from playing them. And also, around this time of my life, just before getting back into playing games, I realised that I'd watch a lot of videos talking about games and not really play them myself. The enjoyment wasn't there anymore for me to sit and play, so instead, I took the create over consume technique and kind of brought it into my life with a lot of things, which is why I have various different channels. I have a channel to talk about TV and film, which is Exiled Commentates. I have this channel, which is for gaming. I then have a tech channel, a self-improvement channel, and so on. Like, I have all these different creative outlets to allow me to create more than I consume to a degree, so if I'm going to play a game, I'm at least getting something out of it that I can put out to people. This isn't necessarily the way that you need to take this, however, this is something that's worked for me and reignited my love for many of these games. But yes, overall, I did end up finding that the whole idea of watching games and watching people play them instead of me playing them myself was a little bit dumb. I do know that some of you guys do that as well, and I've seen in the comments that some of you guys do that and watch more gameplay content than you do actually play games, which fair enough. I went through that stage as well. However, for me, I wanted to actually get back in and play the games that I'm genuinely interested in, which meant that I had to have a massive connection and love for these games, and this game was one of them, and it helped me in the moments of my life, such as after my GCSEs, feeling as if I was a massive failure of a human, and I ended up wanting to put out content my entire life, and this was eventually the spark that ended up lighting it up again. When I was failing my GCSEs back in like 2018 or whatever, or 2017, I don't fully remember, I remember being so sad and I would just jump back into playing games all the time. However, after getting a job and slowly kind of increasing my overall feeling towards life, I ended up getting back into games, and that moment ended up leading to me starting this and truly going for it, trying to create content and making my 9-year-old self proud. All of that though was only possible because I was able to fall in love and get lost with the world of Skyrim. However, another big reason that this game is my comfort game is due to where I grew up, and the factor that where I lived was in the middle of nowhere. Which led to me having friends, but obviously due to me living in the middle of nowhere, it meant that we would just sit in Xbox party chats a lot of the time. We'd sit, play games, some of our favourite ones as well, and just sit and talk to each other. We didn't all have to be playing the same thing. We'd go from starting our day playing a little bit of COD, for example, then jump on Minecraft, and then we'd jump on Skyrim as well, and just sit there in the chat discussing where we were on our adventure. The game has also that added layer of connection for me because it was the game that me and my friends were growing up with and being able to explore together and talk about all the time. For me, I ended up finding massive value in things like Big Bang Theory due to the feeling of being a part of a group within that show, which for me growing up was a massive deal. But with Skyrim, I felt genuinely at home with this game. The world's map felt like a home away from home. I remember playing on my Switch on the way back from college and actually just jumping on this game because I wanted to feel as if I was at home and not feeling awful about my life. And at that point of my life, I hated everything about it. And one of the few things I could do to make me feel as if, you know what, I've got a level of control and I feel happier and as if I'm actually at home, is on those awfully long bus rides that were just depressing to be sat on. I would load up my Switch and play some Skyrim. Everything from Skyrim being a home away from home for me, Big Bang Theory being that friend group I wish I was able to feel that connection with in real life, as sad as that may sound, but because of where I lived it was kind of hard to get about and so on. I think some people understand what I mean by this. And then things like the music I'd be listening to either make me happier or match my emotion or hype me up to go do something. All of these things made me feel at home and felt as if I had a connection with something. However, all of this is great and all, but one of the things that I want to discuss with this video is how Skyrim, in my opinion, is a great canvas, and something that a lot of people don't really talk about. People always talk about how the mods are what made this game amazing. However, the mods wouldn't exist without this game being a great canvas to have built upon. Now, the mods of Skyrim have always fascinated me. I would always watch videos of mod lists growing up where the games would look amazing. Everything from the weird mods, the more immersive mods, the great indie made side quests, everything about them was all great. However, it took a long time for me to genuinely enjoy playing the game with mods. I'm someone who always loves playing the games the way that they're intended to be played, so I've always disliked it when other people cheat in a game or do something sooner than required, or when people, for example, will cheese spots in different games. However, the only time I'll admit to cheesing in a game is Destiny, because obviously you need that gear in those Nightfall runs in Destiny Year 1 especially, so cheesing was the way to go. But all in all, I'm one of those people who really doesn't enjoy breaking the idea of playing the game how it was meant to be played, which for some people probably breaks a bit of fun, but for me made the game even more enjoyable playing it the way it was intended to be. So no matter how many times I've tried mods, I always ended up struggling getting into them. I've only recently dabbled into them again, finding more love for them and actually enjoying creating this enhanced version of the game I love. As what I've found with even some of the best mods out there is that I have this big issue of escaping out of this immersion trap that I normally would fall into, because I'd end up seeing something and think, oh, that's the mod pack I added, that looks cool, which for me breaks all of the enjoyment of being in the moment of playing the game. But like I said, I've always been interested and dabbled into this, and it's always been hard for me to allow myself not to look at the mods in the moment and be like, oh yeah, that's the mod I added, because it's something that doesn't feel as if it's meant to be there. But all in all, some of these mods do truly look amazing. My favourite mods are the ones that add immersion. I want to make my game even more immersive than it was already doing for me, so things like immersive weapons and armor mods are truly must-haves for me. Immersive followers, cities, lighting overhauls and so on, all of these are mods that I love and want to have in my game. If I can make it look as good as possible, but also allow me to add that extra layer of immersion, then I'm all in. However, this is where I think mods get a little bit too much credit. Not saying that they don't deserve a lot of the credit they get from a community standpoint, however I think the idea that the game is only playable with mods is a complete lie that most people have told themselves that they have to believe because it's become cool to hate on Skyrim. And the company of Bethesda, instead of just playing the game without thinking about all of the little things that people like to nitpick about the smallest details of this game. The only mod that I'd say people could argue the case of is the unofficial Skyrim patch. But even then, the amount of times I've played this game and had 0 issues, or very close to it, small amount of issues where like they're literally like non-required, they're just funny, is ridiculous. And I find it absolutely laughable when people try to say that this game is only playable with mods. One of the issues that I also have with mods is, like I mentioned a minute ago, which is breaking my immersion. I think there's really cool mods out there that I end up adding to my game, however it takes me an awfully long time to get used to them. Whereas if you're playing the vanilla version of the game, everything makes sense for why it's there, and because you haven't gone out of your way to add anything, you never really pick up on it. Which is where I find it really hard to deal with it when playing with, let's say, some of the mods like the immersive weapons and armor. With the amount of changes in looks and design, it makes me feel as if, you're getting out of that immersion. All I end up thinking is, oh, this is cool, I'm glad I added that mod, instead of thinking about the world itself that I'm meant to be exploring and the immersion that I'm meant to be feeling because of these mods. But it also makes you think about a lot of the time about what you should be using from the different weapons and armors, which I think is a great thing for many people out there who want tons of options and as many as humanly possible, but for me, that isn't something that I'm interested in. I'd rather be constrained to like 30 different options of one-handed swords instead of having another 50 added onto that to choose from. At some point, again, for me personally, I end up just finding it a bit too much to deal with. However, as I've said earlier, the amount of times I've heard the words Skyrim is only playable with mods is ridiculous, and in my opinion is a flat out lie. Now sure, there is a chance that you want to just play Skyrim with mods, which is fine. However, don't try to make it out as if this game is bad and only playable with those mods, because again, it is just a lie, and all of these mods that people love and talk about so much wouldn't be popular if this game wasn't a massively great canvas and people didn't already have the love for this game as they do. It's just a weird fallacy that people live in. If Skyrim didn't have the stories to tell, a great world to explore, a variety of playstyles, and much more, then it wouldn't have the amount of sales numbers it does on every single console generation that it does. And it also wouldn't have the amount of people wanting to create mods for this game as it does. Too many people write off how good of a game Skyrim is, as typically they're just blinded by this belief of superiority of their game being better, or the fact that their PC can mod 200 mods all at the same time, or 150 or whatever. And more commonly, they end up just being so blinded with their hatred towards Bethesda that they just look down on everything about them. So let's talk about some of that hatred that some of these players have for Bethesda, for a moment anyway, specifically around Skyrim, which is where it comes under two different issues. The re-releases of this game, and the second is the Creation Club. So let's first talk about those re-releases. Yes, Skyrim is a game that has been released many times. The ones though that we're going to be specifically focusing on are the ones that are really the ones that people end up having complaints about, which is the Legendary Edition, the Special Edition, and then the Anniversary Edition. So the Legendary Edition, simply put, was a version of the game that was released with all of its DLCs, but it also added mounted combat and some special camera bits overall. It wasn't necessarily too much of an issue, I would say, for a lot of people. It was basically just the Game of the Year edition that you'll see with a lot of games, where it just compiles everything. It's something that, you know, The Witcher 3 has, and almost every single game with some DLCs has. Then you have Skyrim Special Edition, which I think most people were fine with. However, there was some people who were complaining because they were releasing another version of Skyrim 5 years after Skyrim had released, and people are just complaining. And this was around the time that they started bringing this game to everything possible, even a smart home device that I'm not going to say the name of because I don't want to give you that bit of pain that you're going to go through if I do, so let's move on. But it also added some graphics changes. It went from a 32-bit to a 64-bit in its special edition, so people were able to make this game look cooler than it was already, and it was included if you owned the base game. And it also came with the Creation Club, which gave the ability for console players to have mods without having to do any weird workarounds, which normally didn't work anyway. However, one of the biggest benefits, like I mentioned a moment ago, is that if you owned the game digitally, you could upgrade it completely for free. And if you didn't have it digitally, then you could just pay an extra £16 and you would get this full version of the game that was upgraded. So all in all, it wasn't too bad. Then between the years of 2016 and 2021, the game was being released on everything humanly possible. But then again, the Anniversary Edition, which personally, I honestly have zero issues with, a lot of people started to have a bit of quarrel with. And a lot of the big criticisms that you'll hear towards stuff like this is the whole idea of, oh, they're just not working on anything. They're dedicating their time to re-releases of Skyrim as if they think that, you know, the majority of the studio is working on the re-release of Skyrim, which is ridiculous. In my mind, I think a lot of the re-releases were just finding reasons for people to complain more than anything. However, one of the big issues that I do agree with overall, and it was actually like an understandable bit of outrage, was that this game was released, and if you get it on, for example, consoles, it will still be very expensive if you had to buy it outright, but luckily it's normally always on a deal of some sort. It was £50 at release, which is ridiculous. It's absurd. But all in all, you do get a lot with it. I ended up getting it for only £6 on the Xbox store, which was great for me. And in my opinion, that lowered price was perfect for me. But again, you can get it right now for like £20, which is still, in my opinion, very much worth it when you consider that £20 gives you a game with 20 mods as a part of the game. Some are more lackluster than others, but some are genuinely great. Then you also get a slight bump in graphics, very minuscule though, not much to really talk about. Overall though, a lot of the controversy surrounding the re-releases of this game, for me, seems to be more that people are just trying to find things to be mad about, and more in particular, want to be mad at Bethesda about. But then you have the Creation Club, which I think everyone universally agrees is a good idea, but it was poorly executed. Well, maybe not universally agrees, as some people think that mods should be completely free anyway, which is fine, but I also believe that people should want to be paid for their work. If they don't want to be paid, that's fair enough, but to a degree, I do think that they should be paid for some form of work, even if it's something like £1 for something like a full graphics overhaul, which could end up building into its own massive internal marketplace, like you've got within something like Roblox or what Fortnite are currently trying to do, enabling people who want a career within this industry to start having something that doesn't require you to do years and years of work that eventually requires you to then go into a studio, which obviously the modding community already kind of lets you do that to a degree, but also it would be nice to get paid for it, I guess. Now, I'm not going to go on like a 5-minute rant about how awful this is, because I think everyone already agrees that the way it was done was overall bad. However, I think the main issue that a lot of people had was down to the pricing structure and the fact that you weren't able to do as much as I think people wished they were able to do. You couldn't get every mod that you wanted to. All round, the entire system was incredibly flawed. However, for people on console, it did work out well for the most part, and I do know a lot of people who actually did get some mods for it. However, there is actually indications right now that a modding market could be coming to Skyrim on PC, which if it is done right, would actually allow people to mod up their games properly, profit off it, in an actual way that is good all round for everyone involved, and doesn't just mean that people have to pay like £10 to even start modding. They could just buy one mod at a time if they chose to. Now, I do think that the Creation Club was handled poorly. However, I hope that whatever they do with the future of the marketplace idea, they actually execute on well, and it does work out well for everyone involved. You know, with things basically all round working out for things like Starfield's release, Skyrim, eventually Elder Scrolls 6, and so on. However, I don't think that this is enough of a reason for the way that people have as much boiled up hatred towards Bethesda. Yes, I think that 76 is thrown in there, but in my opinion, I think a lot of the hatred was before 76. People were already starting to really dislike Bethesda before then. For me, a lot of it comes down to the fact as well that I've seen plenty of creators, and I'm not going to name them outright because I don't want to start a random internet beef, but the amount of people that I've seen, for example, slate Bethesda for doing those three things, so 76, the re-releases of Skyrim, and then lastly, the Creation Club, I think a lot of people slate those three things as if they're like the devil's work that Bethesda have just done, whereas, you know, they'll hail Ubisoft for doing something pro-consumer for a change, or starting to look like they're going in the right direction with Assassin's Creed. They'll hail them as good, and that Ubisoft aren't, you know, they get too much hate. Ubisoft are fairly scummy overall, and I do think Bethesda have issues as well. However, I've just seen too much of it online where people like genuinely hate Bethesda, but then are willing to defend Ubisoft, for example. It just seems really backwards to me, and I think that people need to kind of look at it outside of this, like, I need to follow the horde of the online internet of saying, you know what, Bethesda is bad because, you know, they re-release Skyrim so many times, but if you actually look at the re-releases, it really does make sense if you actually look at them, but, you know, there is that. You know, the Creation Club was handled poorly, everyone agrees. And then lastly, 76. 76 was awful, I'm not going to deny that. However, Cyberpunk was awful. Yes, they've fixed Cyberpunk for the most part now, and they're currently working with the people who made Rust to sort out 76. All in all, though, you still have all of the hate towards Bethesda, but not as much hate towards people like CD Projekt Red. It, to me, just seems a bit off. One of the issues, though, that the mods do that plague Skyrim to this day is that they make people have this overly valued way of thinking that Skyrim needed to be like these mods did, which doesn't make sense to me, because like I said earlier, Skyrim is a great canvas, and they had so many resources, and a lot of what's come out has come out over time and been developed on a lot more and a lot more and a lot more to make them look even more outstanding. And a lot of people take that for granted. Skyrim from the beginning has always been a great canvas to work on. We get blinded by the mods at times, but the game is truly brilliant. I love the side content. The main story content is lacking, but overall I don't think it's there to be this amazing thing that you're meant to care about. I think it's more an aspect to kind of get you to guide you around the world if you're not wanting to go off and explore by yourself. You can add all the mods you want to make this game look outstanding or make the game even more immersive, but fundamentally it's all just enhancing the existing experience. This game is a great canvas, as it gives you so many amazing moments to enjoy, and the world, in my opinion, is actually brilliant. For me, Skyrim is amazing because I genuinely love so many elements of it. From the moment that I was roleplaying as a hunter, as a kid, I love the medieval fantastical setting that you get with the game, the stories being told. I love the stories within this game as they are heavily rooted within the world's existing lore. Everything from the Daedric quests are some of the most amazing ones as well within the game, but get very little limelight. Some are a little bit dull, I won't lie, however I love ones like Mehrunes Dagon and getting that really cool looking dagger. Even though it's a really short quest, it's a short but sweet quest that makes the whole idea of what Dawnstar is a little bit cooler. We end up looking at mods and seeing them for what they are able to add, and how they were able to change the game over time to make it even better for many people out there. But this isn't what the game needed to be, and I think this is where people get lost in the source of mods. I do think Skyrim has a lot of things going for it, from the open world exploration, looking over all of the vast mountaintops, shouting Draugr off of the top of cliffs. I love this game because it is my childhood game. I remember playing this game for hours on end, loving every moment of it. I want people to love this game as much as I did growing up, and I know this isn't going to be the case that happens for everyone. But if it means playing this game for the first time, or, re-downloading it, then please do. If this video is anything, let it be a message to just retry playing this game. If it's with mods or without mods, make sure just to jump back in and try and explore the world. If you love this game as much as I do, then please let me know down below, and if you hate this game more than most people, then I honestly would be very surprised if you've made it to this point in the video. But this game is great. It is the grandfather of open world video games, and I'm happy to say that it is one of my favourite games of all time. Now, with that all being said, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. This video essay has been in the works for quite a while, and I hope it wasn't too all over the place. I didn't know necessarily how to make this one. I felt very all over of kind of like, do I want to do like, the Red Dead 2 style where I'm very much like structured of, okay, this chapter, this chapter, this chapter, then I talk about gameplay, so on and so forth. I wanted this to be more like I mentioned earlier, more like a love letter to Skyrim, talking about why I love this game and talking about how it made me feel. And this is something that I'm going to talk about in an upcoming video essay about the way that games make you feel, more than anything else than looking at the technicalities of it all the time. However, if you do want more of those technical areas and talking about that sort of thing, make sure to stay tuned, as I will have a GTA 5 video essay coming out in the next couple months, and it will be very much structured like that Red Dead 2 video essay. All in all though, if you guys did enjoy this video, please make sure to leave a like, do subscribe, and like I said, I started up a Patreon, so if you do want access to a little bit more and you want to support the channel, it will cost literally around about the same amount of money as what someone's Costa does in the UK, or what your coffee might be at something like a Starbucks a month. So it would be a great help to me personally to make this dream become more of a reality, and I'd love to keep you along for the ride, give you shoutouts in many videos to come, and all in all, I'm just grateful, even if you don't do that you've made it to the end of the video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.